The hall smelled of sweat, stale beer, and something darker that clung to the air like rot. The wooden floorboards creaked under the boots of men who had come not for trade but for sport, eager to laugh at the suffering of whoever was unlucky enough to be dragged onto the platform that night. Clara's wrists ached under the weight of the iron cuffs, the cold bite of metal rubbing raw against her skin as the auctioneer jerked her forward with a tug of the chain. Her breath hitched, though she kept her chin low, refusing to give the crowd the satisfaction of seeing her eyes fill with tears. Her family hadn't even stayed. They had handed her over, muttered something about debts and useless mouths to feed, and walked away as though she had never shared their name. The memory of her mother's face turned away without a flicker of hesitation, cut deeper than the chains ever could. Clara wanted to scream, wanted to ask if she had ever mattered at all, but the words had lodged in her throat and would not come. The auctioneer's voice rang out, harsh and mocking, as he shoved her into the center of the stage. "Here she is, boys. Ain't much to look at, but she's got 2 hands and 2 legs. Strong enough to scrub your floors, if nothing else. Who'll start the bidding?" Laughter erupted. One man at the front raised his mug, sloshing beer over the rim. "I'll give $5 and a good bottle of rum. That ought to cover her worth. $5. Another sneered from the back. "She's not worth the price of feed. 2 chickens and a horse blanket." The hall roared. Men clapped each other on the back, their laughter echoing through the rafters as though this were some grand entertainment. Clara's cheeks burned. She bit the inside of her lip until she tasted blood, willing herself not to cry. Tears, she knew, would only fuel their amusement. She had learned long ago that weakness was blood in the water for men like these. "Come now," the auctioneer shouted, feigning disappointment. "Surely the lady deserves better than chickens. Who'll give me $10? A man staggered to his feet, his face red from drink. $10. She can keep my pigs company in the pen." He howled at his own joke, doubling over as others joined in. Clara's ears rang. Each jeer chipped at the little dignity she had left. She wanted to shout that she was more than this, that her worth wasn't measured in coins or chickens or the drunken laughter of strangers. But her throat was tight, and her hands trembled in the shackles. The bidding turned into a game of mockery. One man offered a rusty plow, another a mule with one good eye. They weren't bidding to own her, they were bidding to outdo each other in cruelty. Clara's knees weakened, and for a moment she thought she might collapse. Then came the silence. It began like a shadow, a pause that seemed out of place in the chaos of jeers. At the back of the hall, a man straightened from where he had been leaning against a post. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his clothes worn but clean, his hat pulled low to hide most of his face. He hadn't laughed once through the spectacle. Now his voice cut through the haze like the first crack of thunder before a storm. "I'll take her." The room went still, then burst into noise again. "You, Walker?" someone shouted. "What use do you have for a chained-up girl?" The man stepped forward, his boots heavy on the wood, his eyes fixed not on the auctioneer or the crowd, but on Clara herself. For the first time that night she felt seen, not as an object, not as a joke, but as a person. His jaw was set, his face weathered from years under the sun, but his gaze was steady and unflinching. "My son needs a mother," he said simply. The words fell heavy in the room, weighted with something that silenced even the drunkest jeers. Clara's breath caught. She couldn't tell if he meant them for her or for himself, but the sincerity in his voice was undeniable. The auctioneer blinked, then forced a laugh. "Well now, Henry Walker, if you're serious, you'll have to back it up with coin. This isn't charity after all." Without hesitation, the man, Henry, reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pouch. He set it on the table before the auctioneer, the coins clinking together with the sound of every bit of savings he had scraped together. It wasn't much by some standards, but it was more than anyone else had offered in earnest. The auctioneer weighed the pouch, his eyes narrowing as he counted quickly. Then with a shrug he grinned. "Sold!" He unlocked the chains, the click of the key loud in Clara's ears. The cuffs fell away, leaving raw red marks across her wrists. Clara rubbed them gently, hardly daring to believe it was real. She looked up at the man who had claimed her freedom with such calm resolve. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, those tired, weather-beaten eyes, were softer than she expected. Why? The question slipped from her lips before she could stop it, a whisper swallowed by the night air as Henry led her from the hall. He paused, adjusting his hat as he looked at her. "Because no one deserves to be laughed at like that," he said. His voice was steady, carrying no pity, only truth. After a beat, he added, "And because my boy's been alone too long." Clara's throat tightened. She wanted to ask more, wanted to understand why a stranger would spend his hard-earned coins on someone like her, why he hadn't laughed with the others, why he spoke as though she could be something more than what she had been told she was. But the words stuck, tangled with the tears she fought to hold back. The town behind them still rang with laughter, but out here, under the wide sweep of the night sky, it felt distant. For the first time since her family had turned away, Clara felt the faint flicker of something she had thought dead inside her. It wasn't trust, not yet. It wasn't love, not even close. But it was something that had the power to grow if she let it. The ranch lay far from the noise of the town, out where the land stretched wide and endless, a quilt of golden grass and rolling hills stitched beneath a sky that never seemed to end. Clara rode beside Henry in silence, her wrists sore where the shackles had been, her heart unsure whether to race with fear or with relief. The creak of the wagon wheels and the soft snort of the horse were the only sounds, and in that quiet she wondered if perhaps this man was just another kind of jailer. If perhaps his kindness in the hall had only been a mask. Yet when she dared to glance at him, she saw no cruelty in his face, only weariness, the kind that comes from years of hard work and longer loneliness. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun had dipped low, painting the horizon in shades of fire and fading lavender. The house was plain but sturdy, its boards weathered but cared for, a place that spoke of use rather than neglect. And waiting at the fence, gripping the rails with thin hands, was a boy. His hair was dark, his eyes a mirror of Henry's, wide and cautious. He could not have been more than 8. "This is Samuel," Henry said as he pulled the horse to a stop. His voice, though still gravelly, softened in a way Clara hadn't heard before. Clara climbed down slowly, her legs stiff from the long ride, her palms damp. The boy didn't speak, only watched her as though trying to decide if she were friend or intruder. She lowered herself to his eye level, forcing a smile though her heart pounded. "Hello, Samuel," she whispered, her voice trembling. For a long moment the boy said nothing. Then his gaze dropped to her wrists, where the red marks from the shackles had not yet faded. His eyes flicked back to hers, and in them she saw curiosity and wariness tangled together. He didn't answer, but he didn't turn away either, and that felt like more than she deserved. The days that followed were harder than Clara had imagined. She had never cooked on a wood stove before, and the first time she tried, smoke filled the kitchen so thick that Samuel coughed himself into tears. She burned bread, spoiled stew, and dropped more than one dish to shatter on the floor. Each mistake carved another notch of doubt into her heart, whispering that she truly was useless, just as her family had always claimed. But Henry never scolded. When flour spilled, he knelt beside her to sweep it up. When a fence post fell under her clumsy hammer, he reset it with patience and showed her how to hold the tool properly. His silence was not heavy with judgment, but with steady endurance, as though he believed she would learn in time. Samuel remained quiet at first, keeping his distance. He sat on the fence rail while she fumbled with buckets, his thin legs swinging as he watched. His gaze was sharp, measuring, almost suspicious, and Clara could not blame him. She was a stranger in his home, one who had arrived in chains. But little by little she found ways to bridge the silence. She showed him how to twist rope into braids, a trick she had learned as a girl. She hummed songs while she worked, half-remembered lullabies from a gentler past. And one evening, when thunder rolled and the storm rattled the shutters, Samuel crept closer to her chair by the fire and slipped his small hand into hers. He did not speak, but he did not pull away, and for Clara that quiet gesture was more precious than any word. Still, doubts plagued her. At night, she lay awake in the small room Henry had given her, staring at the shadows on the ceiling. What if he regretted his choice? What if the whispers from town, that she was nothing more than another burden for him to bear, were true? She could not shake the fear that one day he would decide she was more trouble than she was worth and send her away.